Michael Heaver here for Westmonster. I'm with former UKIP leader Paul Nuttall. Welcome, Paul.
Former still sounds a bit strange, but there we are.
So how are you getting on?
Yeah, I'm okay. This is the first interview I've done since I stood down on June the 9th after the general election. So just getting back in the saddle. I've been doing a fair bit of writing over the summer. Now we're back in the European Parliament and, work begins.
So looking back at that general election, sort of came out of nowhere. How do you look back on it now?
Well, I remember the day it was called, and I remember being absolutely devastated because I didn't think that she was going to call a general election. I thought, she was going to give a speech on the steps of 10 Downing Street. Maybe it was about a return to direct rule in Northern Ireland or something like that. And I just couldn't believe that she'd done it because it just seemed an act of folly. And as it's proven, it was an act of folly. In fact, it was an act of hubris. We went into the general election and I'll be frank, I don't think we were ready. The UKIP had won the referendum in many ways and it had to sort of find another cause. And it will have to find other causes, and that will be for a new leader to map out. But we hadn't found that cause by the time of the general election. And the reason why we suffered so badly and the reason why our vote fell in the way it did is simply because it was a pincer movement. You had the Tories who were playing the whole Brexit role, and she was giving speeches sounding like Baudelaire and all the rest of it, picking fights with Juncker. So you had the Tories arguing for Brexit, you had Labour, who then suddenly become the anti-establishment party, and they were our two greatest attributes, and they were taken away from us, and we were squeezed, and it was very difficult. Very difficult. Do
you think there's anything you could have done differently, the party could have done differently, looking back in retrospect?
I probably shouldn't have stood in the Stoke by-election because the fact of the matter is I don't think I could ever have won it, and I put my head above the parapet because I realised that UKIP was going to have a very difficult 2017. It was always going to be the case. It didn't matter who the leader was, and I thought if I could just sneak over the line in Stoke, it would change the outlook of the party and where we were going to go. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. What else would I have done differently? It's very difficult to say because I was only in the role for 6 months and I didn't have the opportunity to implement the changes that I wanted. I mean, for example, I wanted to change the structure of the party and the national executive. We were about to put together policy groups, get the members involved in the whole thing and come up with a raft of new exciting domestic policies. And all this was taken away from us because of the general election. And what UKIP's got to do is to dust itself down and quickly, stand up and move on, and I'm sure it will.
So how do you assess the UKIP leadership race? Looking at the list of candidates, how do you assess the party moving forward?
Well, I think Peter Whittle will win, and I want Peter Whittle to win. I made him my deputy, and he was very loyal. He's erudite. He's a clever man. He speaks well. He's done big shows. He's been on the Mars show. He's been on Question Time. This is someone who can hold his own on the media, and for me, I think he will make a really good leader of UKIP who will, certainly focus on domestic issues and domestic policies and continue our role in local government as well. So I think if Peter wins, I think we've got exciting times ahead.
If any, will you back the party no matter which candidate wins? Is there any candidates you wouldn't feel comfortable with as leader?
What do you think?
I mean, there's some suggestion that if Anne-Marie Waters was to win, there'd be some internal wrangling in the party.
Look, I've been very open. I've written an article for the Telegraph about this the other week, and I said I think it would be an insane act of political folly to declare war on a whole religion. It'd be nuts.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke about radical Islam during the course of the campaign. How would you?
Yeah, but there's a difference, isn't there? I mean, I spoke about Islamism and radical Islam. That's not Islam, okay? There's a difference between talking about the political ideology of Islamism and then criticising the whole religion. I think if you do go down that road, you're looking at having a very low ceiling indeed. Looking
at Brexit, what argument have you got that moving forward UKIP now basically isn't irrelevant? The general election result was obviously very disappointing. What do you say to people that said, well, we're basically going to be leaving the EU, UKIP, its job done, the referendum's been done, it has no real future, the general election proved that. What would you say to that?
Well, look, I think what we're seeing now is Theresa May beginning to backslide in many ways, and I think once she does that, the door does open for UKIP, and I think the next leader of UKIP will walk into a political situation which was far more favourable than the one that I walked into, because of course I walked into a situation whereby you had the leader of the Conservative Party who was given speeches which could have been given at a UKIP party conference. That's all gone now. That's all gone now. So the next leader of UKIP will certainly have a far more favourable situation than I had.
We've just seen Jeremy Corbyn today give his speech at the Labour Party conference. Obviously, you're quite a working class lad from Liverpool. How do you see the Labour Party then, the move that they're making? How do you assess that? They've obviously got quite a lot of support at the election, more than people thought. What do you think about this new direction under Corbyn for Labour?
Well, I think if he became the Prime Minister and Labour were in government with their economic policies, I think it'd be a disaster and it'd wreck the economy within 18 months. And I think it's a generational thing. The young people who are getting behind Corbyn now don't remember the 1970s, don't remember what went on, don't remember that bins weren't being emptied, dead weren't being buried, and that we were the sick man of Europe and all the rest of it. But I think once you do have a Jeremy Corbyn government, we'll find out pretty quickly enough, because I think the economy will take a nosedive.
And now, you've been an MEP for quite a while, since 2009?
Yeah.
How has it changed over that period? Can you give people a flavour of what it's like now out in Brussels? It must be quite an interesting situation.
Yeah, we're not the most liked people in the building, put it that way. I mean, I tell you why it's different, because it's people's attitudes towards UKIP. Back in 2000, and because I was out there in 2006 and 7 and whatnot, and a different guys, and people used to look at us and sort of treat us as a bit of a joke. We were those sort of crazies who were calling for Brexit and all the rest of it, but it was never going to happen. That's all completely changed now. People do take UKIP seriously and UKIP MEPs seriously. However, I'm not saying the attitude towards UKIP MEPs is necessarily favourable within the confines of the European Parliament.
Do you think there'll be a deal? How do you assess Michel Barnier and the sort of EU negotiation team?
I've met Barnier before, and I've seen him up close, and he's a class act. I mean, there's just no way getting around that. I mean, he is really a class act. And I think David Davis is a real Brexiteer. I genuinely believe that, and I think he's going into bat on behalf of this country and doing his best. Will there be a deal? Well, if there is a deal, and if there is and we do backslide, and Brexit doesn't really mean exit, then I tell you what, UKIP will be bigger than ever before.
You talked about David Davis. How do you assess Theresa May's performance as Prime Minister in terms of Brexit?
Well, I think her time as Prime Minister will be pretty much summed up by that decision to call that general election. She should never have done that. She had a majority in the House of Commons. Her approval ratings were through the roof. Again, as I said earlier, I think it was hubris. She thought they were going to go on and they were going to come back with a majority of over 100, and she called it completely wrong. And I think she's a lame duck Prime Minister now. I think she's going to struggle with her own backbenchers in the future, and I think she'll probably be gone pretty soon. Do you know what? She could well be gone by the end of next year.
So if that does happen, and Peter Whittle, the candidate you're backing, does become UKIP leader, how do you really think UKIP should drive forward? What should its messages be moving forward?
Well, UKIP's got to continue to be a radical party. I mean, I've been criticised. Some people within the party have said that the things I've said have been too radical. But I think if UKIP moves back to the centre of British politics, there isn't really the room there, because it's occupied by too many other political parties. I think UKIP has to be radical. It has to say what it means and means what it says. I think it has to lead the political debate. So for example, I got criticised for the integration policy, for example, when I was talking about the Burqa and all the rest of it. I make no apologies for that. I was absolutely right. And I think history will prove that we were right. And we're not just going to be proven right, we were brave as well. And I think, the policies that we put forward in that agenda will be government policy within the next decade. And then I suppose people can look back and say, do you know what, UKIP led the debate on that issue as well. Yeah,
unfortunately we've seen, numerous plots, numerous attacks on British soil from Islamists, jihadists. What's your view on that? Obviously you spoke about it a bit during the election.
Well, we had the attacks during the election, didn't we? I mean, there is there is a problem. There is a huge problem out there, and it is one that is going to have to be dealt with, and we're going to have to be pretty ruthless about dealing with these people. I think one of the first things you can do is to ensure that you control your own borders and you know who's coming in and isn't coming into your country. But also I think the police need to get tough, and I think we do have to return to the control orders of the Labour years to ensure that these people are being watched and controlled.
Would you arm the police?
Yes, I would. I think the time has come now for the police to be armed. I think we're living in a different world. I think we're in terms of safety. I think there is a certain group of people amongst us who hate who we are, hate the way we live, and simply want to see this country destroyed. And you know, for example, what went on London Bridge, could that have been prevented if the police were armed? Probably. So you know, it's all about the safety of British citizens.
Do you think the death penalty's got a role to play in this?
Oh, well, do you know, everyone knows my view on the death penalty. I spoke about it quite a bit during the general election campaign. Look, you know, I've been pretty open that I believe in the death penalty for people who kill children and for treason.
Just looking at the situation with the UK at the moment in England, I mean, I know you're a supporter of the English Parliament. What do you think is going to happen if, I mean, there have been some calls for an English Parliament, some calls, but it's not really gathered much momentum. What do you think the future for the UK is if the current system with the Scottish Parliament, Welsh Assembly, Northern Ireland Assembly, but England not having that same...
If there isn't an English Parliament, there won't be a UK by 2050. You know, that will be, beyond Brexit, I think that will become a bigger issue. Once we get into the 2020s, I think there will be real calls for an English Parliament. Because if you look at the opinion polls over the years, the support for an English Parliament has grown year after year. And I think by the 2020s, it'll be a conversation that we're all having.
And finally, Paul, how do you see your political future? If Peter Whittle wins, could you see yourself taking more of a front seat role again, or becoming more active in the media and things like that? We'll see. You know, I'm enjoying writing at the moment. I'm enjoying being in the background. You know, of course, I have regrets about the way it all turned out. I never wanted to be the leader of UKIP, as everyone knew, and I didn't stand in the first leadership election. I just felt that I had to stand to try to save the party, because I felt as if I didn't, and there wasn't a unifying figure, then there mightn't have been a UKIP. So, you know, I did it. Do you think that's mission accomplished for what you wanted to do?
Well, no, because I would have preferred not to have been a general election. I would prefer to have been going into conference season as the leader of UKIP and setting forward a whole new domestic agenda and restructuring the party. But that wasn't to be. You know, it was taken out of my hands in many ways.
Part of you looking at the Torquay conference, thinking, "Oh, I wish I was the leader, and the general election hadn't happened. I'd had my opportunity to do that." Well,
yeah, because I mean, I had all these ideas of rebranding the party and really developing an organisation, a post-Brexit UKIP, which would be focused on domestic issues such as, of course, the English Parliament and all the rest of it. But that wasn't to be. You know, that was fate. I couldn't control what the Prime Minister did. I couldn't control the fact that she called a general election. I couldn't control the fact that there was this surge in support for Jeremy Corbyn. I don't understand it, and I still don't understand it. But you know, these were all things which were taken out of my hands. The only thing which I can look back on, actually, with which I'm happy about, is I think I performed pretty well in the debates. I think my interview with Andrew Neil was decent as well. I don't think I let the party down in any way, shape or form in that sense. And, you know, if I'm seen as the leader who kept UKIP on the pitch for greater things to come, then, you know, I'll be happy with that.
Paul Nuttall, thank you.
Cheers, Mike.